Okay, this is George Webb. Good morning. And we are unbelievably doing yet another podcast with the great Peter Duke. And today, this scope, this reach of this story goes all the way back to Babylon. And you've heard all the stories, right? But we're talking about how did we get to where we are today? How did the events and how did the stories that the people in power tell us form history and form the arc of history? And it's called the great flight of the arrow, or the full flight of the arrow. But it's our creation story. It's our creation myth. It's our stories we tell ourselves of how we got here. Here is the great Peter Duke. Peter, good morning. It's 6 a.m. here in Reno, Nevada.
Indeed. Is it 6? Let's see. I don't know.
Maybe 6:30.
It's 6:49, yes.
Okay.
And here we are. And we don't have background road noise in this.
This is going to be much better here.
Indeed. And in fact, if I had known that we were going to start this, I have a little stand we could have put your phone on right now. And you won't have to sit here and hold it. But anyway.
I like the directional microphone here because I can point it at you and then you know you're on. Here you go.
Indeed. We digress. This is professional show business. No. So George asked me, how far do I think? So basically what I've been trying to figure out for the last 5 years is how we got to where we are. And because there's a conventional history that you get taught in school, and then they reinforce on television. And one of the things that I've developed in the last couple of months is what I call the leading indicators of epistemological warfare. Because once you start to realize that the stories that you've been told aren't even close to the way that things have really happened, then you have to ask yourself the question, why? And then you have to figure out a rubric that you can use in order to determine whether or not the stories that you're hearing are correct or not. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I call these things the leading indicators of epistemological war. And it's interesting because you've been covering the Charlie Kirk story, and somebody sent me a TLDR video. It was a video that...
Too long, didn't read.
Yeah, it was a video that was almost 3 hours long. And like that guy, John Cullen, it was just the most overproduced, over-the-top thing that nobody in their right mind would ever sit and watch. But I watched the first couple of minutes of it, and I realized that it was a genius idea. So not all bad executions come from bad ideas. Sometimes it's a good idea, and it's not only... It would have been a really great video if they had done 1/10 of the effort in the production of it. Mm-hmm. But the conceit of the video was that Machiavelli wrote a lot about the advantages of an assassination. Like what are the tactical and strategic advantages and for example, and just one off the top of my head is that when you start quoting the words of someone who's been assassinated, it's very hard to attack them.
Right.
So their words become, in a lot of ways, much more powerful as rhetorical weapons.
Engraved almost in stone.
Yeah, because they're unassailable. And there were a bunch of other ones. And why am I talking about this? Because by reverse engineering something that Machiavelli wrote 500 years ago, you can kind of put together this rubric of what I call them leading indicators of epistemological war. So when
these are indicators that once you see them, like you saw Kobe Bryant's death
right
at the beginning of COVID, and you said, "Oh, this reminds me of Michael Hoffman." They start all out their operations with a blood sacrifice.
Right, exactly.
Right, and you go, "Oh, hey, what?" I think you called Ali Alexander and said, "What are they going to do?
Right,
what are they up to?"
Right, in January 2021, was it 2021?
Yeah,
2020.
2020, yeah.
Yeah, it was January. I don't remember whether it was 2020 or 2021. But when Kobe Bryant died, everybody went into this shock, and the interwebs became filled with all of this. People sharing how much they miss Kobe and what a great tragedy it was, and Michael Hoffman refers to that as a psychodrama, a mass psychodrama, because it is.
It is.
It's a mass psychodrama going on. And my first thought about it was, okay, this looks like a kickoff event. What's the next shoe that's going to drop? And sure enough, within a couple of days, the COVID-19 mass psychosis kicked
Mass
off.
formation psychosis.
And so if you think of it as in hypnotic terms, it's an induction, right? You put everybody into a suggestive state by exposing them to this mass trauma. So there's a lot of blocking and tackling here. You know, a lot of people are involved in the drama in the mourning, right? And the shock. That mourning and shock put people into this suggestive hypnotic state.
This is the same thing they do with the MK Ultra kids, which is, you know, the horrible trauma.
That's on a personal one-to-one level, but
Right.
yes, it's the same idea.
Right.
And so, if you have a rubric of these leading indicators, one of the leading indicators that I have is that when somebody dies and it's convenient, go, and this was what also reinforced in the video, and it's also reinforced in Machiavelli, who benefits. I got this from you.
Cui bono,
Okay.
yeah.
Cui bono. It's like, okay, so, and like right off the top, Erica Kirk becomes the master of a $200 million a year enterprise. Okay. Am I saying that she had anything to do with his death? No, I'm not saying that. Am I saying that? Do I recognize in her behavior after her husband is slaughtered in a psychodrama?
Yeah. That kickoff in Glendale certainly did look like a kickoff.
It looked, and the way that it was manifested with the video that went viral around the internet, and then the guy who comes and pulls the camera down, and the guy with the hat doing the baseball signals, and video of the guy holding something that looks like a rifle 12 feet away, shooting him. Which, by the way, if you shot somebody with a 22 Magnum at 12 feet away, you might get something that looked like that. And again,
we're all drugged through this. The point is that you have this 2 month of gut-wrenching video going over and over, reliving the psychosis,
right, and
reliving the trauma.
And when Butler happened, one of the things that I talked to George about the other day is that George taught me. It's all in the metadata. And I've spent the last 5 years doing nothing except continuing to go meta, meaning continuing to go back, continuing to say, well, what caused that? And I realized that George's method is to use metadata in order to figure out what to focus on. And then you go micro. Right. So you go meta, and then you go micro, and then you go meta, and then you go micro. When Butler happened, I went micro with you. And I felt like my life was out of control when I was doing that, because there's an urgency that winds up happening when you go micro, because you want to figure things out before they can destroy the evidence.
Right.
Basically, is the
Dan Hopsiker lesson he taught me is get there quickly in the first 2 days.
Right.
Because it's all going to get it put into a container and shipped to Washington, or Virginia, West Virginia.
Right, but if you don't have the right mindset, and if you're trying to do something else, like write a book or something, that's crazy making. Because it completely takes you off whatever it is that you were doing.
Right.
You know, if you were planning Thanksgiving dinner, or you were going to pick your kid up at school, or anything else, it all goes out the window.
It helps to live out of a backpack.
It helps to live out of a backpack, and trying to keep up with somebody mentally who's living out of a backpack.
It's tiring.
It's impossible practically.
Yeah.
You know. When the Charlie Kirk thing happened, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to look at the metadata. I'm gonna go in the Michael Hoffman direction. I'm reliving the Kobe Bryant thing, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I want to look at this mass psychosis effect that's going on. Okay, and to varying degrees, people like Candace Owen, you're very kind of attuned to the things that she's talking about. She seems to be going through the same machinations. Although I think that she's, my jaded, one-sided, biased opinion is that she's being handled in that she's being directed in the direction of the metadata that I'm looking at now is people who are coming to the conclusion that it must be Israel.
Right.
Because my meta-analysis is that the empire trademark that I branded the deep state.
Empire, little TM, superscript in the corner, TM.
Right.
Yeah.
Empire trademark.
Yeah.
That this is the controlling interest. This is the deep state, and they are a super state that is above the government of the United States, as Chip Tatum used to talk about.
Right.
Chip Tatum used to say that people don't really understand how the world really works because they think nations are at the top of the pecking order.
CIA helicopter pilot did a big Phoenix program book about Bob Mueller. Chip Tatum, yeah.
Yeah, Chip Tatum, yeah. He did, Operation Red Rock. There's a bunch of Chip Tatum books. There's a couple of Chip Tatum books on the Duke Report bookstock.
And we should take 20 seconds just to explain that you have a library sort of Alexandria of 300 books that have these 6-minute summaries, and then there you have 30-minute summaries as well.
Yeah, I've got, if you go to DukeReportBooks.com, you'll find almost 800 1,500 word summaries. These are things that you have to read. On the bottom of each page, you can link to, or for each book, there's about a 30-minute podcast of AI generated about that book.
And it's sort of a Clayton and Natalie from Redacted Voices kind of, so it's easy to listen to.
Easy to listen to. And if you want to just find those podcasts, you can go to soundcloud.com/The Duke Report. So those are the 30-minute summaries.
And you did all these summaries not because you just decided these are sort of stepping stones on your arc, your story arc.
Right. They support my hypothesis of history.
So they've been carefully selected because you see them as important on this path of discovery.
Yeah, and kind of the Rosetta Stone of that is Tragedy and Hope, which is a 1,300-page book that's a college textbook written by Carroll Quigley. Or let's just say it's a book that is on the same level as a college textbook. He taught at Georgetown for 30 years.
Bill Clinton said he was his best professor.
He's the most popular professor ever at Georgetown University.
Very closely associated with like Anthony Sutton.
Well, he was not aware of Anthony Sutton's work.
Okay.
So even though they were roughly, Anthony Sutton was, I think, 10 or 15 years younger than Quigley. Mm-hmm. But Quigley wasn't really aware of Sutton's work because Sutton was so radically marginalized. One of the things that we were talking about that I was going to mention to you yesterday is that the person who fired Anthony Sutton, who said get rid of that guy, was the president of the Hoover Institute at the time, who was David Packard from Hewlett-Packard.
Okay. So just a quick sketch on Anthony Sutton was this...
Anthony, no H.
Anthony. Anthony was this English writer who came to the United States on these speaking tours and talked about...
No. He was a Hoover Institute. He had a degree in economics.
Okay.
And he was invited by the Hoover Institute to be a fellow of the Hoover Institute and to catalog the economic drivers of the Second World War. And what he uncovered at the Hoover Institute, because the Hoover Institute is where the truth goes to die, which is covered in a book called Hidden History.
Hidden History. Yeah.
And Two World Wars and Hitler.
We have a podcast out there about 2 World Wars and Hitler. So, yeah.
But Anthony Sutton was brought in to cover the economic conditions that created the World War. And what he uncovered was that not only was the Soviet Union, this goes back to Marx and... I'm sorry, it does go back to Marx. He only covers Lenin and Trotsky, okay? But they were fully funded by Wall Street in the city of London. And not only that, he had the address of the offices where they were funded, and it's 120 Broadway, which just happens to be across the street from Zuccotti Park, where they had Occupy Wall Street.
And not far from World Trade Centers.
And the building, from a physical standpoint, it looks like Solomon's Temple, and it mimics the shape of the Twin Towers that were destroyed on September 11th, a block away.
So riddle me this. At the Duke Report, there's merchandise available, right? And you have a Quigley and Sutton. You're wearing parallel construction today, which is a picture of the Twin Towers. Parallel construction and a nice double entendre there. But you have a Quigley and Sutton. I have your Quigley and Sutton hoodie. Why did you pair Quigley and Sutton?
Well, because I think that, going back to the genesis of how you put the pieces together to figure out what the actual history of Western civilization has been for the last 500 years. The seminal work is of Carroll Quigley. He did 2 books that are the most important books. Tragedy and Hope is the first. 1,300 pages. It's a bear. He did a smaller, more concise version that names a lot more names, called The Anglo-American Establishment.
This is something that Mr. Dyer, Jay Dyer, talks about.
Jay Dyer has done extensive. Jay Dyer, Richard Grove, James Corbett have all done extensive coverage on this, but Jay Dyer has really broken it down.
Matthew Arendt also, but he's more the Venice thing.
Matt Arendt goes back a little bit farther, and Matt Arendt kind of, I would say that he's pasteurized the LaRouche worldview.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So back to the pairing of Quigley and Sutton, because it's not a real university, and people do stop me on the street going, "Oh, you went to Quigley and Sutton? I had a friend that went to Quigley and Sutton." It's a fictitious university.
Isn't it great?
Yeah,
Isn't it great when that happens?
Yeah,
it's fun. It's fun.
So you paired. So you've explained why you put Quigley in, because he has this kind of opus to magnum, sweep of history. Why Sutton then?
Because Sutton brings the receipts.
Sutton brings the receipts. Okay.
Sutton is the guy who says this person paid for this. Prescott Bush and George Herbert Walker put together the deal at Brown Brothers Harriman with Averell Harriman to finance the Third Reich.
Right. Union Bank and all this.
Yeah. Right. And many people don't understand that General Electric and you've talked a lot about Standard Oil, but Dow Chemical, all of these companies were in bed with the Third Reich and
Rockefeller Oil.
And many people don't understand. Certainly this book, Two World Wars and Hitler, does a really, really good job of explaining the economics of World War I. But
and we're back to 120
Germany,
Broadway, right?
Yeah, 120 Broadway.
The Bankers Club at the top was where all these decisions are made.
Bankers Club is at the top floor, and you know who owns the building to this day?
Is it Cantor Fitzgerald? No,
it's Larry Silverstein.
Oh, the same guy who owns the 9/11 towers.
Yeah, Larry Silverstein owns the building.
I would be afraid to be in that building. Yeah. Like, Larry, I love you, but I am out of here.
Right. So Larry Silverstein owns the building.
Wow, to this day. Yeah. And you have so much trivia just around 120. Not trivia, really. It's world history.
Again, Anthony Sutton, and this is kind of a weak spot in the LaRouche world. They kind of hold FDR up as this, golden god who couldn't, he
paragon of virtue.
Yeah, paragon of virtue.
Never would trade in German bonds for the Weimar Republic. Never would short sell.
Would never short sell German bonds and make millions of dollars on the crash of the German mark.
That's the thing. That's the danger of listening to Peter Duke, because all your heroes sometimes will fall off the mantelpiece when you find out FDR was arbitraging, short selling Weimar Republic. He must have got inside information to go in heavy in 1933.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So he made millions of dollars on the destruction of the German economy. So it seems fortuitous that he was completely surprised by the fact that, I mean, this is the common myth, right? That, we got into World War II because the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. It's like, we built between December 7th, 1941 and the end of the war, the United States of America built over 100 aircraft carriers.
Wow.
How do you build 100 aircraft carriers in 3.5 years if you hadn't been planning them for a long time?
We went to the bombing sites where they planned bombing missions in Maryland, where FDR used to take his girlfriend, and during matinees, there was an underground where he could take his car and go watch these matinees because he loved movies. And below there was the targeting for World War II, and they said that started in 1938.
Right.
The bombing runs for various German cities in that Maryland facility. John O'Loughlin took me out there, where FDR used to go to watch the movies.
Well, we're still fighting this war because Germany is being dismantled yet again, and it all goes back. It goes back earlier than 1904, but the best information that we have about why I call them the thalassocracy.
Thalassocracy meaning cultures that mainly make money on the water, like the Phoenicians. Thalassocracy.
Or the Athenians, the Carthaginians.
Maybe is that after Thalacia or in, I can't remember the seaport in Greece.
That's a good question. Probably, yeah. And then the opposite of that is a tellurocracy, which is a land-based,
like Telluride, the movie festival.
Or the ski resort in
Colorado. Yeah. So tellurocracy, thalassocracy.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Or you could, if you want to use biblical terms, it's a leviathan and a behemoth. A leviathan is a sea-based monster,
water animal,
and a behemoth is a land-based monster. Right.
Got it. Okay, that reminds me of your X-Files where you had a monster of the week. But
yeah.
I digress. You go.
So anyway,
Sutton and Quigley and Sutton.
So Sutton brought the receipts. So World War I. But going back to you were talking about 1938. It was in the 1890s that the destruction of Germany was being planned by the British Empire, and the idea is that this guy Halford Mackinder in 1904 he did this speech at the Royal Geographic Society called the Geographic Pivot of History. There's a copy of the speech that you can get at dukereportbooks.com, and it's not very long.
Now, Geographic Pivot of History was after they sort of did the trial run with the Boer War. And, the Boer War you've maintained was a trial run of World War I.
The South African experiment was the idea of using epistemological warfare to take over a territory. That is, the British had a long military history of going in with troops and conquering, and having. They did the same thing in India. It's very expensive to run a war that way, where you're primarily using fear to be able to fear that's based on kinetic energy. In order to get the population to do what you want them to do.
Radio waves are a lot cheaper.
Thoughts are a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
Okay. Psychological warfare or controlling what people know and how they know it. And so South Africa turned out to be and the British were at odds. The banking interests were roughly split between Amsterdam and London at that point, and so the war in South Africa was really a proxy war between Amsterdam and London.
And more gold comes out of South Africa for the world gold supply at that time. I went to the company gardens, so I did all the tours and so forth in Cape Town. So it's very strategic. It's the world gold supply.
And diamonds.
And diamonds as well, and the Kimberleys as well. So pushing the Boers out of Cape Town and pushing the Boers out of the Kimberleys and then the Boers find gold again further north in Johannesburg.
Right. And again, one of the things that you learn when you start to study the history of money by people like Alexander Del Mar, who wrote there was Stephen Zarlanga wrote The Secret History of Money, and Alexander Del Mar wrote The History of Monetary Systems. And what you find when you start to study those books is that money is the ultimate epistemological weapon, because fiat money, which has been demonized by people like my friend Max Kaiser, fiat means it's law money. The
only backing is coercion by the state.
Well, it's not
or enforcement.
It's not coercion. It's a way of It's a way of supporting whatever the legal framework of the society is.
Right.
So you've got guys like E. Michael Jones, who wrote a book called Barren Metal, and Michael's conclusion of that book is that you can't, by attaching a moral system to a monetary system, you can enforce morality in a society. And by attaching value to what Michael calls barren metal, it's barren because it doesn't produce anything in and of itself. And so you wind up having situations like you described in South Africa, where people are fighting to have the most amount of gold, because the most amount of gold, why is gold valuable? Because everybody thinks that it is.
Right.
Okay. And if everybody thinks that gold is valuable, then fighting over how much gold you have winds up becoming the method by which you control the world. But if people simply said, "Well, we don't want to be on the gold," Nixon did it in the 1970s. He said, "Well, we're not going to be on the gold standard anymore."
McKinley with the silver dollar, right?
McKinley tried to do it. Garfield tried to do it.
Lincoln with fiat currency. They all ended up dead.
And you know what? And again, here's something that I've only discovered recently. Julius Caesar tried to do it, and he tried. And in fact, the monetary changes that Julius Caesar put into place lasted for 12 centuries. It lasted, and the one major thing that he did is that he took the control of minting gold coins away from the government, and he gave it to effectively the church in Rome. Mm-hmm. And even Charlemagne was completely dependent on gold coins that were being minted in Byzantium, because they came out of the Eastern Catholic Church, because the Pontifex Maximus, or whoever the top prelate in Constantinople, that was the only place that gold coins were allowed to be minted for 12 centuries.
Wow.
We don't learn that in high school.
No, that's an amazing fact that Charlemagne, which is I think 800, AD, still relying on Byzantium coins, which is the other side of the Mediterranean. That's a fun fact that I didn't know. So this broad sweep of history, I remember reading, was it Demarest, William Demarest, A History of the Western Civilization.
I didn't read it.
It was 13 or 14 volumes, and it's just a long slog through this kind of deep state narrative. Marco Polo went to visit Kublai Khan, and he brought back spices and durian, and
he brought back fiat currency.
And you told me he brought back fiat currency. When it was added in any history book, it was all the spices that he brought back, but he never brought back fiat currency.
Yeah, and
he went to jail.
So all of the Bitcoiners and all of the cryptocurrency people, they all. Well, not all of them, because the stablecoin people are you checking our time?
Yeah, we're at about 28 minutes, folks. I just wanted to put in an ad for a guy who wrote a book about tragedy and hope. We call it Less Tragedy, More Hope. It's one of the two people on this podcast. That's your clue. So, but go to the Duke Report. It's at the Duke Report on Twitter. And then you also have YouTube.
It's the Duke Report on YouTube. It's the Duke Report on Twitter. It is Duke Report Books. If you want to find any of these books.com.
Just because some people maybe listen to the podcast and go, "Oh, I don't have time to listen to the rest of it, but I want to go buy the book."
And I put together my own kind of link tree thing. Linktree banned me at one point. I have no idea why they banned me. And then they sent me an email later saying, we unbanned you. You can come back. And by that point, I had built my own version of it. So
Too many people were following your links. That's probably what happened.
I don't know. If you go to dukemedia.com,
Duke Media,
there's the equivalent of a link tree where you've got links to all of the things that I'm talking about.
All this, by the way, in peterdukephoto.com is beautifully put together with photo essays, photo portraits.
Yeah, they're just portraits. I mean, the way that I met you was that I met Andrew Breitbart one day shortly before he passed away, and he was talking about how politics is downstream from culture. And before I was involved in technology, I was a commercial photographer. And I noticed that people who were saying things that I agreed with had really, really bad photographs taken of them, and it seemed to be quite deliberate. That is, there's a category of photographers that I refer to as hitman. The one that jumps to mind is a guy who shoots for Time magazine all the time, named Mark Peterson. And I think
he shoots all those ghostly faces, those ghastly images.
He's a terrorist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially people on the right. He takes these long shadow from the.
He uses a wide angle lens, and he uses a handheld flash, which is the least flattering way that you can light someone. And often he holds the light underneath the lens so that it gives people this kind of Frankenstein Dracula look. He made Eric Prince kind of look like Beelzebub and Mike Flynn and all that. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of other guys out there, and when I was a commercial photographer, I was always trying to idealize the people I was shooting pictures of. When you're trying to sell a widget, you want the person who's holding the widget to look as good as possible.
Trying to sell a sweater, Sharon Stone in the sweater,
right,
helps sell the sweater.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And so the whole idea that you would send editorial photographers out to deliberately shoot photographs of people to make them look as unappealing or evil as possible, right. That was anathema to me. Like I thought, well, there's people who do that? Like I was naive, of course.
They loaded buses for all the people on the alt-right, including myself.
Right, and so, because the alt-right at that point meant, it didn't mean, what alt-right...
Tea Party, sort of...
When I started calling myself alt-right, what I thought I meant was, I believe in conservative American values, and I don't believe that we should be spending large amounts of blood and treasure to blow up brown people. That was what I thought alt-right meant.
Wow.
And very quickly, it became a neo-Nazi white supremacist. That's what alt-right meant.
Right.
And in fact, so I started shooting pictures of people and making them look good. I shot Chuck Johnson. I shot Scott Adams. I shot Mike Cernovich. I shot
Baked Alaska.
Well, I did the Baked Alaska for the New York Times, but the New York Times sent a reporter out, and Matthew Castle, and he said, I can't promise that you're going to like what I write. So they kind of gave me a heads up, and I said, I don't care. And he said, why not? And he goes, because you don't work for the Times newspaper, you work for the Times magazine. And he said, why does that make any difference? And I said, because magazines run pictures, buddy, and you're doing a story about a photographer. And he said, well, I don't understand what that means. And I said, there's no way that they're going to print your story without printing my pictures. And he said, yeah, but what if I'm not saying something good about you? And I said, I don't really care. And he said, why not? And I said, because I don't think most people read. and he was taken aback by that, but I was proven right. And
you were the Annie Leibovitz. The New York Times calls you.
He did not. He called me up to say the story is published, and he apologized profusely to me, and he said, I didn't write the headline, the editor wrote the headline. And I said, what's the headline? And he said, the Annie Leibovitz of the alt-right. And I started laughing out loud. And he goes, you think it's funny? And I said, it's hilarious. And he said, why do you think it's funny? And I said, because Annie Leibovitz worked for 20 years to have that name,
Right.
And I got her name in one headline.
Right.
And I said, she's going to be pissed. You know?
That's the first time I've ever heard that kind of comparison. It works in many ways because you do a lot of work in black and white portrait photography, and she kind of does the same. So maybe
she does color.
Oh, she does color.
Yeah,
okay.
she does color, but
why do I have that impression?
I'll tell you why. Because she does color in a very painterly style.
Okay. Which is the washed out color.
Well, it's not. Here's the thing: a black and white photo. None of us see anything in black and white. Okay.
Right.
And so when you see a black and white photograph, it takes you out of the realm of the known into the realm of the unknown. So black and white photographs, by definition, when you look at them, are fantastic. They put you into a fantasy perspective of what the world is. And she does the same type of photography in color. That is, her photographs are surreal in the way most of them are. And in fact, the pictures that she takes that are the most criticized photographs are the ones that I think where she just... Look, she's been doing this for so long that you get to a point where there's probably... You've done 10,000 shoots, and there's 500 that you think that were good. And the rest of them, you just kind of phoned it in. And so...
why do I confuse her, or not confuse her, but I associate her with Leni Riefenstahl, maybe just famous Jewish photographers,
Well, was Leni Riefenstahl Jewish? I don't think she was. Leni Riefenstahl Leni Riefenstahl was
not Jewish, but they both have that kind of, I don't know, Triumph Derwillen kind of style.
Maybe.
I think when I think of Annie, her, I think of like people having a Manhattan cocktail party, and with cigarette holders and discussing the latest New York Magazine article when I think of Annie Leibovitz, but maybe I got her all wrong.
They tried to be clever with this brush that they painted me with, which is they called me the Annie Leibovitz, who's clearly Leibovitz is a Jewish name,
right?
Of the alt-right. And alt-right, what they meant was a neo-Nazi white supremacist. But the problem that they had with Peter Duke is that if you look at my resume, if you go to my LinkedIn, I designed the online education system for Steven Spielberg Shoah Foundation Institute. And I also worked as a...
How many stories of the Holocaust is the Shoah Foundation? Like 50,000?
52,000 two-hour interviews. So 104,000 hours of testimony.
So there's a good chance that you've done more stories of the Holocaust than all of the Holocaust museums around the world combined.
That's
a lot of interviews.
I designed the online education system for that.
But 52,000 is 52,000 at the end of the day.
It is.
So accusing you of being an anti-Semite is ridiculous.
Yes. And do I have giant questions about the Holocaust story? 100%. I don't think that the 52,000 interviews prove many of the claims made. And that doesn't mean that I don't think that anyone died, and that doesn't mean that I don't think that it was a terrible thing that happened, because I do. But... Right. I also think that there's parts of the narrative that have holes in it that you can drive a truck through.
So you were a fashion photographer. A young Mila Jovovich was one of your finds. Sharon Stone was another find. So and they.
Well, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Okay, Mila Jovovich. I was in a modeling agency the day that she walked in there and said she wanted to be a model
with her mother.
With her mother, Galina. Yeah, and I was invited to Christmas parties at their house when she was a little kid.
But I meant that at some point you had kind of, had big success in Hollywood, and you decided to do the, James Woods thing, where you say, I'm going to throw it all away, and I'm going to be a red pill moment, and I'm going to go for truth over fiction, truth over this fan fiction.
I'm not convinced James Wood is not acting.
Yeah, okay. Well, throw James Wood aside for a second. I like a lot of the stuff he says, but I mean, you, at some point, there's a break, and you go, okay.
But jumping back to the epistemological thing, that's the metadata. Okay, when people are continually saying things that you like, then you make the assumption that they're saying those things because they think like you do.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's the yes ladder.
Yeah,
He said another thing I agree with.
It's called
He said
a mirror agreement frame. Yes.
mirror agreement frame, and there James Wood said another thing I like. Yeah,
Right.
But at some point there's an inflection point. At some point there's something's happening here, and what it is ain't exactly clear. But I know it's something different, and I need to pursue a different path.
Right.
I need to throw away all my success with the fashion world.
Well, no, I had already transitioned. Photography, my major revenue stream in the late 1980s was this antique concept called the department store. And department stores...
I've been to your building. The May building is where the Oscars are now.
Yeah, exactly. The department store generated a huge amount of advertising revenue for photographers, because people who are old enough to remember this, you'd get catalogs in your mailbox every day for a different thing, and there was a huge amount of photography that was being generated, and department stores started to collapse as the big box stores started to pop up. So Walmart and Costco and stores like that started to ascend. And brands like the Gap started.
Banana Republic and
Banana
Abercrombie
Republic,
and
Old
Fitch.
Navy, Abercrombie and Fitch started to pop up, and they started Circuit City,
Right.
Best Buy. These stores started to show up and just eat the lunch of the department stores. And so that started to kind of wind down for me. But I had been a computer science major in college. And so somebody called me up one day and asked me if I knew how to build a website. And I didn't even know what a website was.
So you said yes.
I went and I did. I went onto my AOL account and I downloaded this thing called a web browser that was called Mosaic. And I taught myself HTML because I had been writing Fortran and Pascal and stuff like that. And I looked at HTML and I kind of laughed, because like when you write code, real code, and you look at HTML, it's kind of like Tinker Toys or something, it's kind of funny. And I put together a list. My friend was in charge of building the first commercial entertainment website on the World Wide Web, which was the xfiles.com. And she asked me to take a look at something that I had that they had put together, and I sent her a 3-page email on things that were wrong with the website. And she called me up and she said, "How much money do I have to pay you to get you to start this afternoon?" And so I left my photography career at that point, and I became the director of design at News Corp, and I was in charge of building all of the first generation websites. And
You've worked for some amazing. You worked for Rupert Murdoch there, indirectly.
Again, this was like 1993, and so the internet was a brand new thing. I mean, the World Wide Web was a brand new thing.
About ready to make newspapers obsolete.
And so Rupert came down and had a meeting with us in my office one day, and it was funny because he was supposed to come down at noon, and they had this big catered lunch brought in, and they had all this food there and stuff, and there was going to be a big dog and pony show for what we called him Roop Doggy Dog, and
in the middle of the rap music craze, right?
Exactly. And I started cleaning my desk off, and my boss, Lucy Hood, at the time, she came into my office and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm cleaning my desk." And she said, "Why are you doing that?" And I said, "Because Rupert's coming in." She goes, "Don't clean your desk. He doesn't trust people with clean desks." It's bad. And I said, "Why is that?" And she said, "Because if you have time to clean your desk off, you're not working hard enough."
Right. Okay.
So
those signposts.
Yeah.
And that really leads up to you going through a lot of different creative companies like Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Entertainment, which is Branson, and then of course you worked at GameWorks, right, which was the Steven
Spielberg,
Sega GameWorks. So you've had a lot of touch points in Hollywood for this digital media, or what you call
all of these
transmedia.
All of these jobs that I've ever had, they all had one thing in common, and it all goes back to I had my head down and I was looking at my Hasselblad one day when I was taking a picture of a girl standing there wearing a sweater. And as I pushed the button on the camera, each click, I was asking myself the question, what is it about this picture, click, that makes a woman looking at the photograph want to buy the sweater, as opposed to the picture that I take now, click, that doesn't have the same impact on her? What is the
je ne sais quoi? What is it?
Yeah, what is that thing? And all of the jobs that I've ever had, whether or not it was the digital preview system at Virgin, or the video games that I worked on at Sega GameWorks, or any of the other technology projects, even the online education system at the Shaw Foundation Institute. What is it about this thing that people are being presented with that when they get done interacting with it leads them to believe one idea or another? That I need to buy this sweater, or the Holocaust was bad, or whatever the idea is.
So this is the roots of epistemology, which is what is the motivating factor? What's the thing that brings people over the transom?
The telos, why?
The telos, yeah. And so it's sort of Diogenes chasing the why, looking for the why. And that led you to this whole different life of collecting authors, right? You're basically sort of like a modern day, who was it back then? Herodotus, the guy who...
What I discovered, once you pull the thread of Quigley and Sutton, getting back to the Quigley and Sutton University, you find that there's... so these guys were waylaid in their careers. And I made friends with a guy. There's a guy who wrote a book called... He's written many great books, but his name is Guido Giacomo Preparata. And Guido wrote a book 10 or 12 years ago called Conjuring Hitler. And
I read it, yeah.
And at the time that he wrote the book, he was a full professor at the University of Washington. And after the book got published, like Anthony Sutton, he got shown the door.
Yeah, he got fired.
he got fired. And
because you're basically saying Hitler had a lot of help.
What you're saying is that the story...
And he was used as a symbol.
Yes, I mean, and it's interesting. I haven't followed up on this, but there's a guy named Uwe Altschur who lives in Germany. He's got a Substack, and he wrote a story about 2 years ago that I found through Matt Ehret, where and this was a story that was in the Daily Mail, so you can go find this. Okay, but there's a picture, a self-portrait of Adolf Hitler, painted when he was a painter, and everybody said that he had no talent, but I thought it was a pretty good painting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you look at the early Van Goghs, and
it was painted in 1910, and he put his initials AH on it, and it's a self-portrait of him sitting on a bridge. It's a very specific bridge. It's a bridge that's in Tavistock, England. Okay.
And so he made a trip to England, and it was
This is 4 years before World War I started.
I've been to that Tavistock Institute before they moved it.
And the bridge, the Tavistock Bridge, is on the Russell estate. This is the Russell family that ran the opium trade in China. That is the same family as Bertrand Russell, who wrote the impact of science on society, and what's the other book that he wrote?
So you're developing out a story here, and I don't remember this being in Guido's book, but you're developing out a story. This is sort of like the British intelligence, British East India Company is conjuring up Hitler to play a role to...
He's being groomed
to take down in Europe.
He's being groomed in 1910. Now, he was probably a part of a stable. Look, one of the things that you find when you read the book Two World Wars in Hitler is that Two World Wars in Hitler is that Hitler had a handler who graduated from Harvard named Putzi. They called him Hitler's. This reminds me of the Putin stories, because they called this guy Hitler's piano player, the official history of this guy is that he was
Puzzi at Harvard was the pep rally guy. Puzzi was the pep rally guy.
Yeah, and
that became the Reichstag.
Yeah,
and
they designed the Nazi rallies after pep rallies at Harvard University.
Yeah, give me an H, give me an A, Harvard.
And the Roman salute, which became the Heil Hitler. Puzzi from Harvard taught Adolf Hitler that salute, and
because Puzzi knew the history of the Roman history of the allegiance to Caesar, and said, "Hey, if you really want to become the oligarch or whatever the patriarch, the Führer of Germany, you need to have a sign of allegiance, right, to know everybody in the crowd's with you,
right." So a lot of people. So again, it's not convenient that Hitler was groomed by a guy who graduated from Harvard.
No, nobody wants that story. Yeah. So, is the Puzzi story in Guido Preparado's book?
No.
I was going to say I don't remember that.
No, it's not in Guido's book. It's in this new book, Two World Wars and Hitler. But Guido did again. Guido, there's blocking and tackling. Carol Quigley lays the foundation. Mm-hmm. Anthony Sutton builds the first floor. Guido builds the second floor, and these other guys, Dowd and Doherty, and the guys who wrote Hidden History and Prolonging the Agony. They add the scaffolding. The building is getting taller and taller, and the truth is getting clearer and clearer.
Perfect. Okay, so I've been talking with Peter Duke of the Duke Report. He is a fashion photographer turned creative director turned seeker of truth, I would call that.
Let's just call me a journalist. I'm just
okay. Yeah. I was going to ask you, what do you call yourself?
I'm just
a citizen journalist.
I'm journaling.
You're journaling. Yeah. That way you can kind of say whatever. And Peter has social media sites at the Duke Report on Twitter. And then give everybody your Substack, peterduke.substack.com.
No, it's thedukereport.substack.com. But if you, I've got a redirect. If you just type in thedukereport.com, it'll take you to Substack.
So thedukereport.substack.com is your Substack, and that's really the first place people should go.
Or you can go, like I said, if you go to dukemedia.com, there's a link tree style thing where you can just find all the stuff that.
And listeners can expect to go there and find you walking through time, walking through history, stepping stones of history with these authors.
Well, I'm cataloging at this point, and this is my process. Is that when you and I started talking about this, I told George I was working on a book 5 years ago, and I didn't expect that 10 minutes later he'd do a podcast and tell everybody that I was working on a book, because it takes a while to write. It takes me longer to write a book than most people. And
we had a big discussion last night, and we won't say the name of the person, but this grassroots bookstore here in Reno, or in Sparks, Nevada, where the Tesla batteries are made, right? And we talked a lot about authors, and we talked a lot about the place of bookstores still. Yeah. And, like you said, you brought in this digital world. A lot of bookstores like Barnes & Noble, that was a customer of mine. They went out of business from all intents and purposes. A lot of big bookstores went out of business. But there are still these bastions, these little kind of pleasure islands where you can go in and just have that same immersive. Powell Books in Portland is one I always used to go to, where there was great coffee.
Yeah, our friend's bookstore is a really grassroots bookstore. It's the best bookstore I've walked into in a long time.
I saw all the pictures. I haven't seen it yet, but it just has one of those huge community support things where people can bring their books, sell their old books. They could also donate books, which is
but the staff at Grassroots does a really good job of getting rid of the cruft, and it's a good selection of books.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we were talking about last night is that I bought 3 books from Amazon a couple of weeks ago, and I sent them all back because they're digitally printed on demand in Las Vegas, and the quality of those books is completely dependent on the proofing. That is. The digital printing process, the print-on-demand process, is not the same level of quality as what we're used to in looking at a book. And so the people who craft those books, the people who set the files up, they need to be very specifically set up for digital printing. And in many cases, the publishers have just simply taken the files from their print books and moved them over to the digital, and they don't read well.
There's a lot lost in the translation.
Yeah,
I've had mutilations, and I've done this 50 times, and I've definitely... But more importantly, Peter, just finding these books. You had the fire, wiped out your library in Pacific Palisades,
I had tens of thousands of dollars worth of books that are like like I had a Changing Images of Man, Pergamon Press, Robert Maxwell.
Right, Robert Maxwell.
Okay, and there's two pieces.
He's not a Mossad agent.
There's two pieces of metadata there. One is that it's Robert Maxwell. Mm-hmm. The second is that he named the company Pergamon. Mm-hmm. Pergamon is... a temple in Rome where they did blood sacrifices.
I've been to the Pergamon. It still exists. You can still tour it.
Exactly.
It's huge.
Yeah. So I mean, why does a guy name his publishing company after a Roman temple where they do blood sacrifices?
I think he stole all the literature that wasn't tied down, especially the Nazi scientists, and resold it and laundered it in England through Pergamon Press, and then and then all the compromise of all the writers and scientists, especially science literature, through Springer and so forth, and that became what's known as Springer has gone through several transformations, but the idea that you could still have a great bookstore in America, author's bookstore, right, like Grassroots, is really super refreshing, because there's a chance, we're going to go there today, that you could find those books that you lost.
I think that there's in Gen Z, I've got a daughter who's in her 20s, and I think a lot of these young kids are rejecting digital media at this point. They're pushing back against it, and they like reading books.
And have some kind of touchstone. And you also talked about last night having the remembrance factor. It's almost like a token of like a souvenir.
It's like a trophy.
A trophy of your journey.
I'll tell you one story. I had a meeting with the head of home entertainment for Paramount. This is 25 years ago, and DVDs were the big thing. Mm-hmm. And I was working as a consultant for Microsoft, and we were trying to sell him on the idea that we could put internet-based media on a DVD, and that DVD players at some point are going to be included in computers, and you'd be able to connect the content on the disc to some content on the internet. Mm-hmm. It was which happened.
Yeah.
There was all kinds of politics behind the scenes for why they shouldn't happen, but I won't digress. But he very frankly and friendly, he was very nice. He was a kind man. He said, "I don't care." And I said, "Why is that?" He goes, "Because people don't even, I sell CDs, that's how I make a living." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Most people don't watch them." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "I've got all this research." He said, "I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on this research. Here, you want a copy? I'll give you a copy." Here's what I know. People buy CDs. They go into a store and they look at the picture on the box and they think, "I'd like to see that movie." There's all kinds of reasons why they think they'd like to see it. Then they flip the box over and they look at all of the extra features that are on the DVD, the behind the scenes, the making of, all the other stuff, the bonus content.
Yeah.
And what I know is that the more bonus content that I put on the back of the box, the more likely that people are going to walk with that box to the cash register and buy it. But here's the kicker. The kicker is that most DVDs that are sold, this is the head of home entertainment for Paramount, are never put in the DVD player. People go home, they put them on the shelf. He goes, they put them on the shelf for all kinds of different reasons. They want everybody to know that they have that movie. They had a good feeling because they saw that movie once when they were a kid, and they think that they want to watch it again, and they buy it when they're in the store, and they go home and they put it on the shelf. They never put the DVD in the machine.
But it still triggers, old memories and places you were, people you were with. It's sort of the same reason you have souvenirs of when you go to Disneyland or whatever.
So people front. By having their books. And I'm going through this weird mindset right now because I had my entire library erased. And I want to go buy these books and replace them.
Yeah, they're like Phantom Pain,
But
lost appendages.
But I did already read them.
Yeah. Well, I would go buy, if I found Small is Beautiful with E.F. Schumacher. That was one of the books I read when I was 14.
Says the 6'8" guy.
Yeah, yes. Well, it was all about economics and Gandhi and stuff. But there's a lot of books that I had in college that I would just have to remind myself of my journey, right? And everyone, it's so books can play a souvenir, but more than a souvenir because they trigger thoughts, and memories, So again, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming up on the hour mark. This has been the great Peter Duke, a wandering minstrel and journalist here at the Writers Retreat in Sparks, Nevada, through the good graces of Grassroots Bookstore in Sparks, Nevada. Thanks for joining.